Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leaders Show. I'm your host, Adrian Evans, and I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome Denise from Enfuce. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Hi, I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to getting into the business that's and the style and the approach you have, and obviously talking about the phenomenal growth you've experienced. But as the audience knows, here on the Payments Leaders Show, we want to focus on the opportunities that are presented within our wonderful ecosystem for all boats to rise, and then look at the challenges that are presented afterwards. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and about the business, and that would be great.
Yes. So, co-founder and CEO of Enfuce, and Enfuce has been around just over 10 years. Before that, I spent more than 15 years in the ecosystem as well. So, I chose payments early on without understanding it's becoming my destiny of work life. But it's a good destiny to be in. So, almost 25 years of experience now. And at Enfuce, we are an issuer and issuer processor, so combining compliance and the regulatory piece and then technology infrastructure. And we've scaled the service across Europe and slightly beyond Europe as well, now in the first 10 years.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to you about culture and various things because there aren't many payments businesses I know, and the first thing you see on their website is a wobbly jelly to try and actually make you smile for the day. So I'm looking forward to getting into that in more detail. But I wonder if we could just start with what decisions have enabled Enfuse's impressive growth over the last decade, and what just surprised you most?
I mean, I guess the answer to this question depends a bit on timing of the day or the year or the week.
Okay, of
But I
course.
can think of a few that pops out right now. And maybe the first one that we built for scale before we had scale. So starting Enfuce, we already knew about running critical financial
Okay.
infrastructure. So we didn't build something that to test it on the market to maybe work for 10 customers or so. We built for international scale
Right, okay.
from day one. And that I think separates a bit if you go
Mm,
fast and hard or if you go for the long run from the really get-go. The second was that values was really important to us from day one. And maybe that sounds like a softer angle to it than the technology choices you do early days. But as you grow, you make so many decisions, hundreds of decisions every day. And I believe in having some form of compass guiding you in the directions. And there again comes in the values and that
yep,
you are building for long term. And maybe thirdly, then internationalization
yep.
and how little it means to be a Nordic born fintech when you scale beyond Nordics in Europe and
Mm,
entering every market. You actually have to get that anchor customer in every
yes.
single new market to build trust. And I would actually say that's maybe what surprised me the most as well.
Mm,
How little it means that you are successful, maybe
yep.
then up in the Nordics, to then scale to Italy or Germany. No,
Mm,
they want to see you build
yeah, yeah.
for them for the long run as well. So that surprised me.
Yeah. That's fascinating, but that's the experience of many. Where somebody said to me the other day that actually it's payments, whilst it's global, is very much bought locally. Yep. And
Exactly.
that those proof points. So and values, we're definitely going to come back and definitely dive more into values if we can. So I wonder if you, so what's the biggest misconception that banks and fintechs have about payments transformation today?
That payment transformation is primary technology project.
Yep.
It's not.
Okay.
Technology is usually the easiest part of a transformation. Uh, the difficult part is deciding maybe what you want to own, to understand what differentiates you from the rest of the industry. So what's holy to you, and maybe what you shouldn't be earning. So not sticking to a concept that you've been doing for a long time, but really starting off from a blank paper and think about where do you want to be in 10 to 15 years, and then start the transformation for that. And then comes the really difficult part in, and that's people. How do you get people to think new, to not, maybe they've been part of building what you are running today from the very get-go. They've been in the house for 10, 20 to 30 years. And for them to start rethinking and not protecting how they've seen the world for decades. But that's where you will have to start, and you will have to get first the right people on board, and then get all people on board, because only then you will actually be able to transform the way you want.
Wow, wow. I always look for a salient quotes from my conversations, and I think getting the right people on board and then getting all people on board, I think is going to be it. So I was hearing there almost the triangle there of technology being the fundamental as being a fundamental component, but mindsets and shifting mindset and also clarity of for what purpose, but also what part do we play in this today? What are we going to take and earn from this, but also where are we headed? But the people component, just out of interest, out of that triangle, if you were to say you've only got 100 points, which is the easiest to do and allocate? What's the most difficult out of those three?
The easiest is technology.
Okay.
Because if you have the right technology mindset internally, and you have the people who know tech, they will build as long as you tell them what to build. So technology easiest, people the hardest, because at least if you are a scaled business with hundreds or even thousands of people, it's hard, and it's take true leadership,
Okay.
and not only from one leader, but you need to
Yeah.
multiply that leadership and mindset internally. And then, of course, the strategy. Where do you go? Where do you want to be? That's then the midpoint there.
What about the balance there between, because obviously the speed of change across payments is phenomenal, and it's the last. I think we've seen more innovation. I think it's fair to say in the last decade than the preceding 100 years. Yep. Within payments, and that isn't stopping anytime soon. As there's still so much friction, particularly cross-border payments and etc. But how do you balance that between the speed of innovation and the realities of compliance, risk management, and as you internationalize as well, different different regulators with different risk appetites?
I actually disagree slightly with the premise of the question, because somehow it suggests compliance and innovation sit on opposite sides of the scale. And if the reality for someone is like that today, then I think they are doing something wrong. Because if compliance slows down everything you do, and you do think that it's prohibiting you from moving fast, then you haven't built compliance properly into your everyday business. So compliance, security, and resilience, they aren't things that you should add on top. It should be really part of what you do, and they are holy to you. And I think fintech sometimes romanticizes speed above everything. But moving fast isn't that valuable unless you move in the right direction, and unless you keep wholly to the risk, security, compliance, resilience parts. So, yeah, I don't think that you can win in one of these areas. You win in all of them, or you probably lose and stay behind.
The question was deliberately provocative, obviously. um,
Obviously.
and it was sort of, and again, I think I wanted to just the opportunity to highlight old school thinking there,
Mhm.
which is, again, we can definitely, I sense that in technology generally, like everything's about speed. Well, actually, at the end of the day, whatever we're doing, there's somebody as a consumer. And I personally think that for payments, the currency we're really dealing with isn't trust. And
Exactly.
speed goes quicker with trust,
Mm,
with the right tools in space. So I'm glad we're actually on the same page on that. And again, so I suppose balance is the key, but we need a balanced triangle across these things, not a collapsing one. It was my
exactly.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So when you look ahead to even sort of got 2030, which is got only 3.5 years away, actually, what do you think the payments industry will look like? And where does Infuse intend to play the biggest role within that ecosystem?
Mm. As you said yourself, 2030 is only 3.5 years away now.
Yeah,
And that sounds crazy. So that also means that I don't think that it will differentiate too much of where we
okay,
are today. Uh, but payments will continue to become more and more important, and also less visible. I think consumers will, they won't care about how payments are
yeah,
orchestrated behind the scenes. They want to deal with partners they trust, and they expect it to work 24/7 globally. So of course, AI will probably change how the services are built in the
yeah,
future, and they will appear more personalized to the consumers. Um, but real-time payments won't change that much. It will continue to grow. I think faster in that sense. It's
mm,
becoming more important, not just only for card transactions, but peer-to-peer and global
yeah,
transfers. Everything will become faster there. And then there is this talk about where will card payments be
indeed.
in the future. And I would say that we've already lived almost 10 years with the
Mm,
threat of card payments disappearing as open banking is coming and taking over payments in Europe. And it's not happening. I think we will see more alternatives to card
indeed.
payments in three,
Mm,
5, 10 years from now, but I don't think it will
yeah.
massively remove cards. I mean, card payments are still growing faster than open banking, for example, in Europe. So maybe the growth of the card payments might slow down, maybe not yet in 3 years, but in the future. But the alternative payment methods will be better and have, well, it's all about how consumers adapt to them. So how is the
Mm,
industry that have the consumers trust? How are
yeah.
they adapting to new methods, and how are they introducing it to the consumers? Uh, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating because you say the sort of the end of cards has long been predicted, and actually, as you say, it's still actually growing. It's fascinating for me as well. Like somebody said to me about contactless as a good example.
Mm,
Yeah, and they said to me, this technology's been around for decades. It's been around for a long time, but it took a shock like COVID. Yeah, but if you'd have said
mhm,
to me 10 years ago, the card in your that you can use now as £100, well, in the UK, and there's talking of unlimited amounts that you can tap and go, I'd be like, that's not happening. There's no way we would do that. There's no chance it's going to happen. But of course, now it's become normalized
mm,
because of a shock, in this case, a pandemic. And it seems a lot of things in the payments, the technology space is around, especially almost within the ecosystem. You can't do anything on your own in payments on your own. But you bring the right people together. It's the humans almost. I feel like we're catching up. What's your perspective?
No, but 100%. It's about how consumers adapt to the new technologies. And then it comes to how is it introduced? I mean, the first contact payments, most banks had hard security limits on them. So no one really adapted to it because you could only pay in Finland. I think the first payments were 15 to 30 euros. So it was only seen as paying for your coffee. Then you maybe tap your card. Otherwise, you anyway had to use chip and PIN. So it was introduced in a way that it wasn't really appealing to adopt to something new because you couldn't use it. But then, as you say, through the pandemic and the tokenization, suddenly it was introduced even from the banks that they recommend you, and this is how they play a part in keeping everyone safe. And then suddenly it's like, it's convenient. Let's use this one. So I think it's a lot of it is on how the industry introduce the technology to consumers. What's the benefit? Why should I do it? If it's seen as something like I have no benefits of it, you're not even thinking of adopting to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that word's come up a number of times. The trust, hasn't it? It's interesting for me. Yesterday, I paid with a card and I tapped, and it was for a coffee actually. And they needed me to put the pin in, and I was like, oh, that's suddenly inconvenience. This is suddenly a bit of friction.
Yes.
And but what about the sort of wider piece there? Because I think that's the thing from. Well, what do you see as the biggest opportunity within payments? Because again, I can see so many elements that friction's being reduced, and we don't want to reduce. As somebody said to me that they actually, if I'm buying a very very large item like a house, like a car, I need some friction. I do what is not the same as buying a coffee or buying an ice cream. So, what do you see as the biggest opportunity there?
I still think that it comes to exactly what you were talking about. So the security elements and to fight fraud. Enfuce just did a report earlier this year that showed that women and men are experiencing fraud equally if we look at amounts that been fraudulent, but the women are affected much harder of the actual fraud happening to them. So their trust in the industry, they start to avoid using digital payments. They even get like anxiety and sleepless nights over what happened to them. And that's bad. And I think we haven't been looking at fraud and how it really affects the real people out there. The industry have been talking about fraud as something they need to reduce to save costs. But not many have been taking the human aspects of it and why we will have to fight fraud. And again, here comes how it's introduced to consumers. What is fraud? Why are we putting in these annoying security elements where you will have to use the PIN suddenly when you just buy a coffee? It is to protect you. And friction is welcome when consumers understands that it's protecting their own funds. So explaining it, and there I think the industry can play a bigger role and more important role than we've been doing in the past.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I heard an appalling statistic really, which is if fraud was a country in the world, it'd have the third largest GDP. There's something else you said there really fascinating me. You said that whilst it's affecting men and women more, it's happening, sorry, to men and women equally, it's affecting women more. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so the study showed that was it 70 to 80% of the women felt less secure using digital payments after being part of fraudulent transactions, while the similar percentage was like 50 to 60% lower for the men. So men sees it as something that happens to them once and then they are protected again and they move forward. While the women really start thinking, okay, how could it happen to me? What did I do wrong? How can I make sure it's not happening again? And then like, if it happened to me, can I still trust the provider. So the anxiety and distrust to the industry just plays much harder on the women.
Well, sorry, I've never thought of that. That is fascinating because it's
Yeah,
interesting for me. Many years ago, the first fraud I experienced was I was in London and I'd been working, and my bank had called me 4 times, and they said this was back in 2001. They said, "Have you been in London all day?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "So you haven't been to Paris?" "No." You haven't been to Barcelona?" "No." "And you haven't been to Havana?" "No." Okay. But what was great was it was the time difference from Barcelona to Havana that said at a retail outlet you couldn't be in the same place at the same time. And so I'm just thinking about this. For me, then, obviously, it didn't actually affect me after the confirmation because the money was secure,
no.
and I've, I've I sort of thought, oh well, that happened, and actually I now trust the systems even more if I now think about that.
Yeah. And that's then also, you probably have a good bank there, because how they walked you through that and how they made you understand how they protected your money. But you probably haven't heard many others who have explained the fraud transactions in similar ways. I still
That's true.
believe most it is on the consumers who get their credit invoice, or maybe even from the bank account start to see, what are these transactions? I
Yeah,
haven't
indeed.
been making these purchases. And then you have to contact the bank, and then you maybe even have to defend your position. And then you start
Yeah.
questioning yourself, did I do this or did I not do it?
Yeah. Yeah. Good
So
point.
you had a good fraud protection catching
Mm.
the fraud. And this was already, what
Yeah.
did you say, 20 years ago? No, 2021, so 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, sorry, this is fascinating. So that happened to my daughter the other day, and I could see psychologically what was happening to her. Like, who do I call? And then she was tracking all, did I do that? And it was quite a bit of
Exactly.
self-blame there. What process did I
Exactly.
go through to enable it?
Mm,
And I was sort of saying to her, and I was pointing out to her, she hadn't created. So, wow, but I think you're right. The key thing is what the industry needs to do is not look at this as just a technological challenge. There's a human cost to that. And actually, this is not just about cost prevention.
no.
Somebody described, I think it was MasterCard CEO Michael Meeback, saying that fraud is a tax on the economy, and the
Mm,
payments industry has an obligation really to solve that. But I think it also needs to solve it from not just a cost perspective, but from a human impact perspective too.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay. So I wonder if you could give me an example where customer feedback really fundamentally changed a product or strategy, as you scaled internationally to how did that impact you?
Yeah, I actually had to think about this question a bit harder as I saw the question before we started the recording, and it wasn't as easy to. I assume it happens more often than I give our customers credit, but
Okay,
but
okay.
it wasn't like to find that pinpoint thing that really
No,
changed. But then
okay.
I actually in the near future, like just earlier this year, we actually launched a new product, and I realized that that is that is really born out of maybe not a direct customer request, but if you listen in between the line. So we call
Yes,
it the embedded
yes.
analytics.
Yeah.
And so we realized that just giving access to payment data to our customers isn't the same as giving them value from that data. So I think the whole industry have been fairly proud of how we are able to share data, not only through
Okay.
batch files, but it's real time, it's API based. So it's all in your hands to read and understand that data. But then from a customer perspective, dealing with that huge amount of data, and that's
Mm,
just one angle from probably across many payments
yeah.
rails that they are having. So how do they read about the finance, the fraud, the operation, product performance,
Okay.
It isn't that easy, and building the entire analytics capability in-house can be challenging for any company. So when we started to find ourselves in position where we really tried to help the customer read the data and understand next steps. So how did the
Okay.
product launch um, work for you? Did we see peak? Where do we see friction? That's how my team then came up with, I think we can do more here. I think we can build them better analytics. So we know the question that any issuer will have on their card portfolio. So why don't we build that easy, accessible, in readable data rather than just being proud that, oh, you have it all out there, just figure out how to use it. So yeah, I think that's the thinking and the understanding and
Yeah, yeah.
more reading in between the line, how we communicate with the customer, then ended up as embedded analytics
Yeah.
for us.
So just so I can understand that, so but that takes somebody to stop and say, actually, yes, we're given the raw data and forget the sort of pats on the back and saying, actually, how do we turn this raw data into insights that are useful that then ultimately answer the question, therefore, so what? And therefore, so what next? That's a mindset. Where does that come from?
I hope it comes from the culture that we
Okay.
have, and you talked there about the wobbling coming on the homepage, and like we proud ourselves with the quota of happiness built in. So we
Happiness, what,
really
sorry?
happiness built in.
Happiness built in.
That's how we want our customers to perceive the service. And it's like, what? But you are infrastructure provider. Yes. But happiness built in means that you can sleep well at night when you partner with Enfuce, and you can think about the funny parts of the business. But that happiness built in is also, what more can we do for the customers? We really encourage the team to read in between the lines of the questions of the customer. So don't only solve for the request here and now, but think further
Mhm.
ahead. Okay, if we solve this, what could be the next step? So otherwise, it becomes like very short-term, quick fixes. But everything should be built for the long term, and we want to scale everything across the full customer portfolio. And then we have the opportunity to serve big banks who have a lot of knowledge and they are their own issuers. But then we also serve the smaller customers utilizing
Yeah.
our license capabilities, and they have much smaller teams, and the questions differs quite a lot. But when we understand the both sides, when we build something, we can build so it serves, we can say, both of the segments, because we always think one step
Yeah.
ahead of where we are today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we've been building here towards values and culture, and let's dive into this. So you've got the headline of happiness built in, and also I was, obviously up until now you've been talking about building for the long term. That has a longer term mindset. But what else was laid down to start with, and how have you also? Well, tell me what else was fundamental in terms of the values of the culture of the business.
Transparency
Yep.
and direct communications. And this comes fairly easy for the Nordic borns and especially the Finns. We can be seen as too transparent, especially for the Brits and people born and raised in the UK. And it's maybe not as easy for
Okay.
the UK born to speak up and to be very direct. We don't have to talk around the problems we see. Let's go directly into it. So because that's again builds trust. And that's why transparency and direct communication is so important
Mm,
to us. And then you talked about the long term, and then also collaboration,
mm,
because we knew from day one we can't build the company we see on paper by ourselves. And in the industry of payment, no one works as a lonely rider. So it's all about being part of the bigger ecosystem.
Indeed.
And it's about really partnering with the
Okay.
ecosystem. So not just enter the system and kind of, yeah, we are part of it, but really try to get so many partnerships as possible. So really understanding, what do you do? This is what we do. So where will our roads cross when
Yeah.
we have maybe a joint customers, or even with the ones you are competing? So collaboration as
Okay.
well was really holy.
So could we just dive into the piece there? I think it's particularly important because um, about direct communication. It seems interesting to me that again, cross-culturally, and I think this is fascinating to do business globally. And there's some wonderful studies on Erin Mayer's done a wonderful study on this in her book about studying business globally. And tell me about the piece about direct communication, because direct communication gets the message over. But in my experience, particularly as an executive advisor, is you then could isolate that individual if you haven't built trust, first of all, with them. So almost for me, I always, coach people on this and advise them is to any leader is build the relationship and the channel effectively, then you can land the message because it's seen. But if that person feels psychologically unsafe, the thing you think you've been direct, you have been direct, but you haven't been productive.
No. Okay, I hear you. And now I think the perception is that being direct always comes to matters that are really difficult to talk about. But even, let's say I have a very uh, early stage call with a prospect customer, so they just want to meet the CEO and understand the company
Yeah.
I'm running and what's holy to me. In that very first introduction call, when they asked, so why should we choose Enfuse? I say that working with Enfuse, you can trust that we hold your back, whatever happens. And let's not fool ourselves. Dealing with payments that should run 24/7, there will be incidents. So if anyone is promising you a
Yep.
flawless
Yep.
production with no incidents, then I wouldn't trust them, because there will be. So the important is, how do we communicate also in the hard situations? So I set up for them understanding that, okay, when something happen, this is how we will act. And
Mm.
then let's take this direct communication in a case of an incident. It's important that you only state the facts that you have. I don't want to see blame gaming during an active incident, because that's helping no one. Everyone focus on, what do we know, how it is
Yeah.
affecting the customers, and what do we do to solve it. And then afterwards you start looking, okay, but how could it happen, and how do
Yeah.
we prevent it from happening? And it's the same during a project. So we can't help anyone launch anything new 100%. It needs to work simultaneously with what the customer is doing. And if they ask for our direct opinion from seeing more than 60 customers go live and launch new products, of how do you think we should go ahead
Yeah.
with the decision, I will give them the best answer possible. But that doesn't mean that I become rude, or that I become like,
Yeah.
it's the
Right.
only fact at hand. If you don't do it my way, then you do it the wrong way. So, yeah, because 100% trust is needed. But that's also, for me, any customer of Enfuse, trust is needed for that to be a working
Yeah.
partnership. And if a customer loses trust in us, then I would see that that's a lost customer, unless we are able to gain back trust. But gaining back trust, much harder than building trust for the first time.
Mm. Now, I really like that the almost preemptive components of setting, not just setting the boundaries, but actually setting the realism that
Yeah.
however we look at a thing is going to go wrong. We don't want it to, but it's how we then respond to it. And you're absolutely right. It was funny actually that there was a large during the World Cup. There was a large payments business, and some of it went down. And it was really interesting. The rest of the industry didn't jump on the bandwagon and said, "Oh, you could have used us," because everybody was very aware that could have easily been them, because
Yes,
it's that 0.001 that could actually
exactly.
happen. But it's so. How have you protected? You talked about happiness built in. You talked about transparency, trust, collaboration. As the business has grown, as the business has grown internationally, particularly as well, dealing with business with different customers and different cultures of employees, etc. How have you protected that culture, or has it evolved?
Mm. I don't think that you should protect the culture,
Yep.
because you don't want to have the culture that worked for a 10 people team when you are 200, because that would mean everyone knows everything, everyone does everything, everyone is involved in everything.
Yep.
So I think what you should protect is the values, because the values are wholly to the company, how we want to operate,
Okay.
and also translate into the promises that we make for our customers and partners. But then the culture, it has to evolve with the people that you take on board. Every single employee has played a part of evolving our culture, but we like center ourselves around the values. We know what's holy to Enfuse and what makes Enfuse
Yep.
a great place to work, but also someone you want to partner for critical infrastructure to. And those values can translate into behaviors that are non-negotiable for us. So if we
Okay.
are all centered around them, then we embrace the different aspects of culture that everyone takes along, joining on this journey. And that's actually the fascinating part, to see how it evolves. And
Okay.
as we start to, I think we've just like maybe 2 years in employing more in Spain, and that's very different culture from the Finns in the Nordics, and the distance is huge. And but they have also brought a new type of uh, positivism, and maybe not being too kind of, it has to be right now, here and now, everyone has to meet, but it's more like center around how we make it work
Relationships. Yeah.
together. Yeah. So it's fascinating. So yeah, think about what you need to protect, and then embrace with the people you
Okay.
bring along.
So obviously is a very strong foundation of the values within the Infused business. But if we talk about the leaders and employing
Mhm.
future leaders and growing future leaders, what's the one trait for you that a leader that you would promote or sponsor needs to have that is standout and non-negotiable for your business?
I would say that they are uh, like culture carriers, and they are that through the values, so
Yep.
they really embodies
Okay.
all of the values that we have. They are able to speak kindly, respectfully, directly. They are open to collaborate and getting people along on the journey. And they always remember the longevity of Enfuse. They don't cut short corners,
Okay.
but they really think about the long-term value
Okay.
for the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we can look a bit broader now and look at the industry, what's a belief that you have about leadership, business, or payments, or all three, um, that you hold today that most people in the industry would disagree with?
Whatever I say, people will say, no, no, we agree. So I don't know if there's an answer for this one, but maybe we've slightly over glorified the consensus of or in leadership.
Mm,
And maybe what I would emphasize more is that a healthy company should have disagreements
yeah.
internally. And because if everyone around my table, my own leadership team, if they would just agree with me all the time, then I would be really worried about
Yeah,
like where are we going, how will this work out for us. So I would say my responsibility um, as the CEO is to encourage again that open conversation, and I want to hear opposite opinions than my own, and then I want us to be able to really find the best possible uh, path forward.
yeah,
So yeah, healthy tension,
of course.
that's needed in every team. And it might be harder to build healthy tension than people think. And maybe it comes back to the leadership. So I can't disagree with anyone, but it's still, I would maybe more glorify healthy tension than just leadership.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you very much indeed for sharing so many insights here. I've got pages of notes here, so I wonder if I could just sort of perhaps focus on some of the most salient elements that come from that. So I think the start, the whole point that's enabled growth really here is it's sort of culture, and culture really in terms of values. I think the eye always on the long term and
Mm.
building for scale before you had scale. I think that was about foresight and actually some bravery and courage as well, but also to know actually this is where we're heading. And actually, that must have been good for the people as well to know this is where we're heading. And by the way, this is what we're doing throughout that process. I think the other key was that we talked about a misconception, but you sort of shown about a triangle, which is obviously we're in a complicated industry in terms of technology. Then there's mindsets or change mindset, and then actually the people. And he said, actually, with the right brief, with the right people, the tech stack will sort of take care of itself. It's are the people ready to catch up and leave yesterday's world to evolve to where we can go, but also then the actual people themselves. Like are the right people in place? And I thought that was a fascinating quote where you said, start by having the right people, and then you can take it to all of the people. So you can scale the people mindset as well, and not just the business because they're so interlinked. I love the pushback then as well, particularly on the question around fraud, which is growth, fraud, security, and compliance. They're actually intertwined. And none of those stools, the table will fall over if we're only just focused on growth via speed without compliance and effective development when they're enhanced together. Because a strong sense I got from you was that within the payments industry, well, first of all, you can't do anything much on your own, so collaboration is key. But trust is the currency of the payments industry. Interesting as well there when we just looked at two stepping out only 3.5 years now for 2030, which is, as you said, the sort of end of cards is not happening anytime soon. But there's bigger issues like fraud for us to tackle. But also the technology's in place, but it's that human adoption and trust. And the other interesting element about fraud, some of the very much human implications of fraud
Mm.
and how that can, whilst it affects uh, genders the same way, the impact it can have can be quite different because of just how we're made differently and how we're
Yeah.
socialized or conditioned socially. So, and I think there's a message there for the industry, which is to think about the impact on consumers and not just see fraud as a cost exercise to be taken out to drive EBITDA up. Dare I say? Yep. And then when it came to talent and culture, I love the element there of happiness built in, and the fact that when you've got a strong culture and you know the strong culture, being direct at the start of a relationship, with a customer, with a partner, with an employee, it's let's know things are going to go wrong, but have we got the relationship and trust in place so we can anticipate what's going to go wrong? I think the other interesting one for me as well then was also about um, actually working with a customer, which is actually it's anticipating and seeing between the lines rather than almost waiting for we launched this, it was really badly wrong. We then had to go into huge beta testing afterwards. And it's like, well, this is the data, but how do we make this useful for you? And what can you do with it? That's true anticipatory belief. And then in terms of, love the fact there about that healthy disagreement and healthy tension around a board table, around a partnership table, around an employee table is not about hierarchy. I was getting the sense actually it was about doing the right thing for the business, driving towards our goals. So they were my key takeaways from our conversation.
Well, a great summary uh, on the fly in the conversation. No, I think you captured it all very nicely. How did it take us 45 minutes to get to that? But you captured it well.
Thank you, thank you. But if I could, respectfully hand the final words over to yourself, and what would be a salient message you'd have, because obviously this is going to go out across the payments ecosystem. So I wonder if you could share that with us.
I would say that as any leader thinks about the future, first of all, dare to dream big, dare to think differently. So almost like if we were to start from a blank paper, where would we like to see ourselves? What would
Yeah.
be the dream scenario? And then think about what's holy to protect to get there. I think most companies within our industry will have to evolve and will have to go through transformations projects and then find the right partners. As said, I don't believe anyone should do everything in-house. So, and this is also where maybe AI then comes in to play a role, that it's not about only the technology you see today at a partner. I believe more in the trust economy there. So who is the partner that you can trust to not only be viable today, but in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Because the transformations you are set out to do, you don't want to redo them too often. So create your own legacy by thinking new and partnering with the right partners like Enfuce.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much today for your ideas, your evidence, and also that's so much appreciated by the audience. So thank you very much indeed, Denise.
Thank you.